Welcome to another episode of Happening Sounds. And today, Patrick and I are going to talk to each other in a 2-video series about 5 albums that changed the way that we respectively
These
think
aren't
about
necessarily
music.
our 5
favorite albums of all times. Just ones
5
that changed our
albums
thinking.
that stuck a fork in the road and made us go down different paths. So,
Here are
Olivia
5
Drummer
albums.
Control, Dusk at Cubist Castle. An Elephant Six band that I had discovered around the same time as indie favorite Neutral Milk Hotel. Jeff Mangum was at different points a member of the Olivia Tremor Control. I just found musically, lyrically, Olivia Tremor Control were more dense, more lush, more interesting. I still love my Neutral Milk Hotel, but Olivia Tremor Control were always my favorite twin. Just
From
the
Elephant
mixing of
Six.
different sounds, the lo-fi aesthetic. They just recorded and bounced tracks and layered things and made super interesting music.
So how did this change your way of thinking about music at the time?
I don't know if it's thinking about music, but hearing things. I still go back to this album, and I've had it for the better part of a decade, and I still hear new parts. They recorded it on 4 and 8 track, and like I said, they bounce stuff around, and you get to a point where you bounce a track so far into the mix that you can't pull it back out. It's an everything in the kitchen sink record, and it just showed that you can do a hell of a lot with. I love the sound.
much.
I like the visuals. It's also lo-fi and aesthetically pleasing. It's just Will Cullen Hart's pencil crayon drawings all over the place. And this gatefold, I'll give it to vinyl for this. You get to really appreciate the artwork. So the first Olivia Tremor Control album that I actually owned looks like this, except it's got a black frame, and it's their Peel sessions that they did for the BBC. It's got a whole bunch of different crowns on the cover with a black background, red frame. They have a song off of their singles collection called I'm Not Feeling Human, and then the next 2 tracks are 8 to 10 minute long medleys of a whole bunch of Olivia Tremor Control songs that are either single tracks, album tracks, or previously released tracks, but they tie in a few of the different Green Typewriter chapters in their medleys. And that's what I heard first. So going back and hearing the sections of Green Typewriters, which you can put on a mixtape or a mix CD on your own, but they do flow and they do connect and they do mutate into completely different sounding tracks. So the further you get into Green Typewriters before Spring Succeeds, it turns into like a brown acid trip. Some of the songs sound like your psychedelic Beach Boys, Olivia Tremor Control music, and then they start warping the tape and adding echo and backmasking and doing all these things that just sound like you are tripping badly. And it's interesting. It's very interesting. There's a song in here called Frosted Ambassador that sounds like kind of could be carnival music before jumping into Jumping Fences, which has a kind of elastic guitar, double recorded vocals, and turns into great album, a pop song. I love Olivia Tremor Control, and this is the album that really cemented it for me. The Peel sessions were my gateway drug, but Dusk at Cubist Castle, so much so that when I lost my copy, I actually bought a second. One of my big geek things is the BBC Radiophonic Workshop. It's an establishment that started in 1955 by a lady named Daphne Aram. Delia Derbyshire was the biggest name. There's Dick Mills, Dudley Simpson, John Baker, Hattie Kingsland, a whole bunch of people who went through the BBC Radiophonic Workshop, did music for art installations, ballets, film, television. Most notably, especially in our 2-point circle, is Doctor Who. I got into Doctor Who through the music of the BBC Radiophonic Workshop, and now I'm a fan of both. But I really I love how the music came together. So I've discovered a label called Trunk Records. Back when these were both readily available, I got them both. So I consider it one album split across 2 discs. This is the John Baker tapes, Volume 1 and 2. He's the first person I really dug deep on from the BBC Radiophonic Workshop. I first heard the BBC Radiophonic Workshop like a lot of kids watching Doctor Who. My dad would rent the videos from the library and get me and my sister in the recliner, and he knew that the theme song freaked us out, so he'd always pull the legs out and just let us scream and cry until the actual show came on. But that theme song,
It's haunting.
which had no bass, it was just oscillators and,
Yeah.
and tape cutting and stuff. Anyways, the John Baker tapes are a bunch of recordings John Baker did for the Radiophonic Workshop, other library recordings, home recordings, electro ads, the soundtrack to Ridley Scott's first short film, Boy and a Bicycle. So whereas Olivia Tremor Control was this lo-fi bedroom recording where they kind of just did what they thought would work and just mashed it together, the BBC Radiophonic Workshop did that even earlier with even more primitive equipment. They had sound generators, tone generators, oscillators. They would record things onto magnetic tape, and to make different notes and sounds, they'd play things back at different speeds. They would record that. They would take a blade and cut the tape and then paste it back together and come up with these amazing songs and jingles and otherworldly sounds just by means of necessity. They needed something for a science fiction show, or they needed something for a biology program or a nature program, and they needed something that that brought that feeling, that evoked that feeling. And now, being about 40, 50 BBC Radiophonic recordings into my collection, especially everything before 1970, is just boggling that these people would take everyday objects, broken piano and a house key, a water bottle or a cider jug that they were pouring water out of, all of these random everyday objects that they could just transform into sound, which they could even further transform into tones and pleasurable notes, or notes pleasurable to the ear, and Frankenstein it together into something Monster beautiful. Movie by Can. My friend Eric Tonsiker got me into krautrock. We would play Grand Theft Auto at his house.
Along to Can.
Along to Can and Noi and all those bands, but Can was the first one that he played for me. And usually the first thing you hear by a band is what you latch on to. Malcolm Mooney was the vocalist for this iteration of Can. He was their first vocalist who only ended up recording initially 2 albums with them, and then later on came back for their final album, Right Time. But Monster Movie was, it's a 4-track album. The shortest song is just over 6 minutes. The longest is just over 20. The vocals of Malcolm Mooney were just kind of freewheeling poetry that just kind of flowed out of him. And the music did too. Apparently the way that Can recorded is they would press record, get hours and hours of music, and then just kind of cut and paste it together like the BBC Radiophonic Workshop did into something.
I'm interested, like, for you, what is special about Can? Because I consider them a very, and I wanted to get to the root of what that is for you.
When I think of Can, I think of my friend Eric. But he got me into this band, and I bought all of these Can. But I took him to the radio station where I do my show, and I started this segment called Compulsory Can after one of our local radio stations has mandatory Metallica. And I've been doing that for about 10 years now, where I've just, every day at 1 a.m. I play a Can song. So my friend Eric, Compulsory Can, when Damo Suzuki came to Winnipeg for the first time, he played at St. Norbert Ruins, and I, as a tribute to that, I wasn't going to do my show because the show is on Thursday night, so I made a burnt CD of all Can's material with Damo Suzuki on vocals, and he happened to be at the radio station at the exact same time I was dropping it off, so he had never seen these reissues, and he was flipping through the booklets and finding pictures of himself that he'd never seen before. And then we met up at the show, and then I met him again a few years later when he played at the West End Cultural Center. So there's just all these little points in my life that that since I've been introduced to Can, it's just come back 10
That's
times
interesting.
as hard.
I mean, for me, I love the philosophy of the band and the way that they're trying to make their music come out of an organic jam, and it's not really about composition.
Yeah,
it's about
that's
feel.
that's what they were all about. They're all about just not sticking to a genre. They had their ethnological forgery series where they just took a sound or an idea from a culture and just kind of turned it into their own thing. They just made it Duotang.
Before you go into the
Oh, yeah.
explanation, can I just guess where you're going with this? And I think this series of records is all about music that's changed you in some way. Would this record be important to you because it's sort of that first concept that a successful band can be from my own town,
Yes.
and the fact that they could be people that I know, and that sort of connection that music is happening everywhere and it's happening
That's exactly
right
it.
here. Yeah.
So I, back in the late 90s, early 2000s, when I really got into music, seal of approval for me was Mint Records from Vancouver, BC, Canada. They had bands like Huevos Rancheros were my gateway, Cub, Pansy Division released music on the labels, the Stan GT from Ottawa, the Groovy Ghoulies would do split releases with Lookout Records, same with the Smugglers from Vancouver, Nardwar's band, the Evaporators, just bass and drums. I loved the vocals. I loved everything about it. And reading the liner notes, I saw that this band was from Winnipeg. They were this weird outlier from the mostly Vancouver Mint Records. And I saw they were from Winnipeg and got their albums wherever I could find them. Volunteering at the West End Cultural Center, Rod and Sean were friends with our old artistic director. I think he was our artistic director, Chris Pegas. And so they'd be around all the time, and I couldn't believe that these two guys who, in my years, were bigger than Jesus, would just come into the West End in their cool coats and good haircuts, and I knew every word to every song that they played on these albums. And to me, they made it. Like, to me, they were this Winnipeg success story. They were like my Super Rainbow. This is another one that I wish I had on vinyl just so I could hold up and you could see this album, Dandelion Gum, was their breakthrough album that they ended up going on tour with the Flaming Lips. I thought that the name Black Moth Super Rainbow was interesting. I thought that the imagery was even more interesting. And then when I finally checked them out, the sound was unlike anything I'd ever heard. It sounds like you're in like a hazy, cotton candy colored dream. You know those tropical Skittles that are not as bold as the regular Skittles? The colors are all pastel. That's what it feels like. Black Moth Super Rainbow is one of those bands that I don't know exactly how to put into words. It's just it's an amazing feeling. It kind of takes me back to, you know, the after kindergarten feeling where you go to school for your half day and then you come home and you have cereal for lunch in front of.
So you use the word feel to describe this. So how would you compare this to say
Ken is driving? This is kind of like a cloud that just descends upon you and envelopes you. And
the next video in our series is going to be the 5 albums that have changed the way that I think about music, and these have been yours. So hopefully these videos will allow you, the viewer, to get a sense of where we're coming from. Please, if you're interested in our conversation about music and you'd like to hear us rattle on about these things, press the subscribe button down below. Thanks, guys.
Somewhere here.